Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Normally, Kieran and I like to have a light-hearted chat at the top of the show, as we people in the business call it. That's the start. We call it the top, just to confuse you muggles out there. But we haven't got time, Kieran, because we've got so many news stories to get through. Sadly, not all of them good. None of them good, to be perfectly honest. Otherwise they wouldn't be on the show. And the first one, Kieran, is a catch-up. We spoke at some length last week about the vote taking place between the two groups of Bury fans. That's happened now. Could you tell us what's happened and the ramifications of that happening?
Yes, I think very much as predicted. AFC, the Phoenix Football Club that's been set up, which is now playing in the Northwest Counties League. They recommended to their members that they vote yes, and they had a 94% in favour voted. And then we've got Bury Football Club Supporters Society, who I think it's fair to say didn't give any indication or leadership as to how they would suggest people vote. Well, 63% of their members voted in favour, but under the terms of, I think it's dictated by the Cooperative Society regulations, you have to have a 2/3 majority. So these votes came through on Friday night. First of all, we had the AFC result and then the Bury Supporters Club. So because it's less than the 66.66%, the deal has collapsed to merge the two organisations. Now, Bury Football Club Supporters Society, they effectively have Gig Lane. So we've got a football club which doesn't have a football stadium, and we have a football stadium which doesn't have a football club. There's not enough room in Bury to really run two clubs. The council effectively immediately responded, saying it was very disappointed with the result, and they were withdrawing £450,000 of funding, which was going to help in terms of some of the infrastructure issues at Gig Lane, and also to effectively provide sort of some seed funding as well. So watching this unfold on social media wasn't particularly pleasant. It does appear that quite a few people who have voted against the merger seem to do on the basis of personal vendettas against people from the other side who they regard as traitors for trying to set up a football club. I just cannot see the logic of this myself, because somebody said to me, it was, well, you wouldn't get Manchester United and Manchester City agreeing to merge, and I said, well, no, but you've not got a football club. You're just the owners of some property or controllers of some property. It makes no sense. AFC have said, well, yeah, we'll just have to forge on. We'll try. And the AFC website is very transparent in terms of its finances, its governance. Perhaps it's seen as being too progressive, dare I say it, by some of the people associated with the other side. But it is very much now two tribes, and it's a step backwards in terms of getting a football club from Bury at Gig Lane playing again and moving forwards towards ideally a return to the EFL, where they have a rich history.
As you say, Kieran, some of the social media, many fans from both groups, for some reason, saw fit to copy us into tweets they were sending to each other, which went into micro detail about various local rivalries. It will come. I don't think there's any consolation to any of the fans left frustrated by the result of the merger that this was a source of discussion before the Palace game on Saturday. I was flattered and a little bit surprised as to how many Palace fans had followed this story through our pod, and most of them were a bit baffled as to why AFC, for example, already established in the pyramid, didn't just carry on. And people were kind of confused as to where the impetus for the merger had come from. But mostly the response was, "What the blinking hell are they doing? They need a football club." That was the response from most Palace fans. So the wider world of football is talking about it, but it is difficult, I have to say, for us to get a handle on it. For those of us who are outside the situation, for those of us who are outside the two Bury supporters groups who don't know the reasons why this is going on, it does, as you say, it just seems counterproductive and it goes against your intuition, doesn't it? It's counterintuitive that this should be happening, but it is, and it doesn't seem to be. And I mean, that £450,000 of funding that's been withdrawn, was that potential funding if the two clubs had agreed to, or the two groups had agreed to meet?
Yeah, it was conditional. And the Council Football Supporters Association, I think the FA have been involved. Everybody wanted it to go ahead. I think it ended up with 268 people voted against, and that has caused the deal to collapse, the merger to collapse. There's now some people on Twitter proudly showing as their Twitter badge a 268, as if it's an achievement to not have a football club, and that's what I can't work out. If Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness could get around a table together, then two groups of people from the same town who used to stand together on the terraces together, it's just crazy.
Yeah, one hesitates to use the word sadly in the same sentence as democracy, Kieran, but sometimes that's how it works. Democracy, that's how it works. And sometimes it goes for you and sometimes it goes against you, and you have to accept that was the vote and then try and persuade people to change their mind. But it is a shame. I'm going to issue a don't panic warning now, Kieran, because Derby fans listening, this is a Derby story. There's almost a warm glow of nostalgia, but it's not a bad one, trust me. But there's some conjecture has been resolved this week, Kieran, about just how much the club was sold for.
Yes, so the administrators, Quantumar, published their 6-monthly report. It was 85 pages long. I've read all 85 pages, as you would expect me to. So the club was sold for around about £17.7 million to local businessman and lifelong Derby fan David Clowes. But there's as many questions as answers that arose as a result of reading the report. So he bought effectively the football club assets, but the football club did not own Pride Park. That was owned by a separate Mel Morris company. And I think he bought that for around about 22 million. So that brings the total cost for a club in League One to around about 40 million. Now that seems intuitively on the high side, especially for a distressed asset. If you compare that to, I think Portsmouth was sold for around about 7 million. Admittedly, they were in a tier low, but Portsmouth, big team, decent support. Sunderland went for around about 35 million. Again, big team, decent support, big ground. And there were lots of things which just, the more you read it, the more weird it becomes. So Mel Morris, who has come in for a lot of stick, including a lot of stick from me, he ultimately, it cost him somewhere between 125 and 250 million pounds. Now, reading the numbers, it could be that some figures have been double counted, some figures appear to be sort of transferred from one company to another, but he did put a lot of money into the football club. What I found very weird was that when somebody at Derby County, and I'm 99.999% certain who did this, put together something called a statement of affairs. And a statement of affairs is where you list out all of the money that is owed by the club to creditors. Well, according to the person who put this together at Derby, the club owed £320 million, which seemed a vast sum of money. And yet, what the administrators have to do is they come in and they write to people and say, well, how much you owed? And that came to around about 3 million in terms of unsecured creditors. So it's gone for, the difference between 3 and 320 is, ludicrous, but somebody, for whatever reason, said, no, I'm not owed any money, or has effectively said, I'm willing to write that off. Now, I suspect a lot of those sums are due to Mel Morris. Football creditors, which have to be paid in full under the rules of the EFL, they came to nearly £9 million. So I think some of that money was owed to Arsenal in respect of an outstanding transfer. It's unclear from the wording, which is either intentionally or unintentionally ambiguous as to what's happened in respect of the claims made by Middlesbrough and Wickham. I believe that, looking at comments we've seen in the press historically, Mel Morris and Steve Gibson came to some private agreement with the claims made by Borough. We don't know what's happened on the Wickham side. And then we come to our issues with tax. Derby ran up a total tax bill. I think it came to around about £28 million, because what had happened was during COVID, the club the club executives, and I think it's really important we separate the football club from the people involved, because Derby fans take it very personally if you say, well, Derby did this and Derby did that and so on. Right. It's actually ultimately Mel Morris and Stephen Pearce, the club owner and the chief executive. They were the people making decisions, and decisions were made which resulted in around about £28 million of VAT, PAYE and national insurance contributions being deducted by the club. So the club, when you get your net salary, the club effectively has said, well, I am collecting this money on behalf of HMRC, and it's duty bound to pay it across. As a result of COVID, first of all, there was, I think people have forgotten, it was chaos. And one of the things which Rishi Sunak, who was then the Chancellor, said, because of the carnage that's taking place, we're going to give companies a longer period to pay those tax matters, but they've still got to be paid at some point in time. Well, that money wasn't paid. Under a relatively recent change of legislation, which arose pre-COVID, HMRC were entitled to 100% of the money that was due to them. And they ended up only taking 25% as part of the settlement with Quantamar, which means, the taxpayer has lost somewhere in the region of £19 million, which, in the wider scheme of global taxation or national taxation receipts isn't huge, but it's still a huge amount of money. Now, I contacted some people from other championship clubs at senior level, and I said, well, okay, what's the reaction coming from your boardroom? And the response was, well, we're furious. We're absolutely livid. We've had to take out loans either from the EFL or from the owner or from other sources because we've had HMRC chasing us. We have paid 100% of our taxes, and Mel Morris's and Stephen Pearce's Derby County has ended up paying 25%, even though legally they had to take 100%. Now, people say, well, how did this arise? And I'm not being critical of Quantamar here. What they've done is that they've gone to HMRC and says, well, if we have to pay you 100%, the price which we would be demanding from a potential buyer simply isn't feasible. Therefore, we'd have to put the club into liquidation, and you'd end up getting nothing. And it's a negotiation tactic. It's fully logical. If I'm honest, that's what I've done myself. Yeah. So I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. I'm going to say this is the way the cookie crumbles. But you can understand the anger at other clubs, and of course, this also sets a precedent because now every club owner who is thinking, well, administration could be coming down the line at some point will say, well, yeah, if it comes out of it, we know that HMRC will blink first, and they will take a fairly sizable reduction. So the taxpayer lost out. Local creditors, they lost out. They only got a quarter of what they were entitled to. The people who did quite well out of it were Quantumar themselves. They've got around about 1.7 million. They say that they've incurred time costs of 3.3 million, and they've had to effectively write off the difference. They said the reason why it cost far more than expected that they challenged the points deduction given by the EFL, so they're blaming the EFL. They're talking about protracted sale negotiations. Well, it was them who got into the Chris Kirchner preferred bidder. And it's got to be said, again, I do talk to journalists, do some background research and due diligence. What you can do on the internet is quite considerable. And there always were significant question marks over Kirchner. And yet Quantumar seemed to think that he was a viable purchaser, and it all came crumbling down. They also said, well, we had meetings with stakeholders. Well, that's what you do. That's part of the day job. It's not an additional cost. Whether they're perhaps saying, well, at times we spoke to some of the supporters trust and supporters groups. They blamed having to talk to the press for running up costs. They blamed having to keep the EFL and MSD Holdings and HMRC up to date. Well, that's not additional cost. That's part of your job. So I found some of these comments a bit harsh. The average hourly rate charged by Quantumar was £438 an hour as far as Derby County itself was concerned. So, it is quite considerable. They charged £140,000 in travel and accommodation costs. That's you could even run Producer Guy's Gold Carriage on that. So legal fees, 1.7 million for our silver tongue friends, and then £300,000 of payments to consultants. What these consultants did, who these consultants were acting on behalf of, is a little bit unclear. But clearly these fees were agreed by Quantumar and the people involved. So no mention of Mel Morris in it, no mention of Chris Kirchner. A few bits of snarkiness at the press and the EFL and stakeholders. It's a weird one. Ultimately, huge credit to David Clowes for taking on the beast. Taking the club effectively with no players. But by the time he acquired the club and attempting to drive it forwards now, and I would say he's whilst we don't talk football, the new manager is excellent because he used to be a close friend of my ex-personal trainer.
Close friend of your ex-person. Oh, okay, right. That's within 6 degrees, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm not going to lie, Kieran. When you said there'd been a statement of affairs at Derby County, I was childishly hoping for something much more juicy than that. With I could also hear producer guy take a sharp and take a breath.
We discussed that story the other day.
Some of the social media stories that are beginning to emerge. Two factual things, though, Kieran. Is this report? Presumably this is a routine report, end of administration report, I guess, is it? And time costs. Does that simply mean that it took longer than Quantumar thought for it to take place, essentially?
Yes. The administrators are obliged, I think, to do a report every 6 months. I would imagine that when they were appointed, they would have ideally hoped to have been out before Christmas. Now, we are fully aware that there were interested parties who were considering buying the club. There did seem to be barriers placed in the way of at least one of those parties, is my understanding. Who those barriers were placed by, not for me to say.
We're taking a trip to the West Midlands now, Kieran, away from the East Midlands. 3 stories in a row. Just to make the first one even more interesting, because I suspect we're going to be talking about this situation at other clubs on a regular basis. Birmingham City, I'm going to put these words into an order, Kieran, and then you can sort them out. Has collapsed crypto partner.
Yes.
At the risk of sounding like Yoda. But yes, this is Birmingham City's crypto partner has collapsed, and we're no longer surprised by this happening at any club, are we?
No, and once again, we're indebted to the Rottweiler-like Martin Calladine, and if you've read Martin's book, or if you follow Martin on Twitter at Ugly Game, he's a man on a mission, and he's got a sense of indignation, which he's absolutely entitled to have, because this is tale after tale after tale, and it's where clubs don't appear to do anything apart from be blinded by the check.
Yeah.
So what we have is an organisation called Ultimo GG, which on the 28th of February said, we are introducing Birmingham City to the metaverse. Jesus. This may have come as a shock. This may have come as a shock to the metaverse. It subsequently transpires. Because within a month, Ultimo GG's digital footprint had all but disappeared. It stopped tweeting. Its website was effectively taken down. And the thing is, if you work in business and you're going to have a business partner, one of the things you should do is a bit of due diligence. And it will probably take you no more than 15 to 20 minutes to realise that Ultimate GG appeared to be sort of a series of companies owned by a dad and lad combo. Nothing wrong in that, in theory. It was promising to have an interactive club museum, a virtual merchandise stores, and, of course, NFTs and fan tokens, which have decreased in value since February by 98%. They had a crypto bro. Now, a crypto bro is a person that goes on social media and sort of normally has a beard, cowboy hat, is covered in bling, and says, buy the dip and ride it to the moon. And this is what the crypto bro was doing in respect of Ultimo GG. So now, I'm a great believer in saying if something looks too good to be true, then it isn't true. And also, if something is being recommended by financial heavyweights such as Paris Hilton, Michael Owen, John Terry, and co., then again, I'd be cautious. I'm not saying what people do with their own money is their own business, but these people are not noted for having a background in finance, and you don't have to have a background in finance to invest sensibly. But celebrity endorsements are one things which are always a cause for concern. But what really grinds my gears was that Birmingham City, even after some of these things were starting to come to light, the club was still effectively promoting this product. Yeah. So they did no checking, or if they did do checking, then they've completely ignored the red flags. They've promoted a product which has zero or close to zero value. And why have they done that? Well, we don't know. A, whether they agreed a fee. B, whether that fee has been paid, because that's a separate issue. But the reason why these organisations are trying to get into bed with the football industry is that the football industry gives them legitimacy, and more football clubs that do it, the more and more footballers that do it. These people are. There's an element of trust that you have with your football club. And it gives normalization and credibility to these products, a significant proportion of which are worthless.
Good Simpsons reference there, by the way. Grinds your gears. Very good.
Yes,
I love Birmingham. I've spent a lot of time in Birmingham. Yes, my in-laws, God bless them, God rest their soul, were based in Quinton. One of their next-door neighbours, I won't name him, in the way that some Brummies can do it, he made Eeyore look like Michael McIntyre. He makes me laugh so much because you'll say to him, I can't do that. It's a nice day, Sandy. Yeah, it won't last. I just imagine saying to him, "Good news for the Blues, Sandy. They're joining the metaverse." I just trying to explain to Sandy that they've got a crypto bro who says buy the dip and ride it to the. I just imagine Sandy going, "What the fuck is a crypto bro? Buy the dip and it's just down the road, West Brom. A big financial story coming out of there, Kieran."
Yes. West Brom are appearing on this podcast too regularly.
They are, aren't they? And their fans, their fans as well on social media seem to have suddenly twigged that something might be wrong. I know you use the phrase red flags a lot, but they're going all over. They're semaphoring all over the place at the moment, aren't they, around the Hawthorns?
Yeah, and box after box after box. Auditors changing left, right, and centre, slow in submitting their accounts, and then the owner borrowing money from the club. It's normally the other way around in terms of the relationship between football club, and that money is due to be repaid by the end of the year. So it'll be interesting to see whether that is confirmed. One would hope so by the club. Hope so is not the same as confident. So the story which has been broken, and this has come through on Sky, is that West Brom are approaching MSD Holdings, who we've just been talking about effectively in regard of Derby County. They were owed £22 million, plus they lent it a further £3 million, I think, during the course of the administration. And that was secured on the sale of Pride Park. So according to this story, MSD Holdings are potentially going to lend up to £25 million to West Bromwich Albion. What's that going to be secured on? Well, West Brom's parachute payments end on the 30th of June. So I can't see them being secured on the parachute payments because the vast majority of those parachute payments have already been received by the club. So therefore, the only other asset that remains is the club stadium. So it's effectively the West Brom are taking out a mortgage if this deal goes through. Given that the club has had 18 months of parachute payments, why is it now going in hock to a lender? Bid red flags. The owner being coy, not really getting a lot from the chief executive coming out either. We keep saying the same things. Be transparent, be honest, be open, be upfront, engage with people. Clearly not at £438 an hour as Quantumar are doing, or claiming, using as a reason for their fees. But it just doesn't look good. And we've been contacted by West Brom fans who are concerned. We've got, I think it's an organisation called Shareholders for Albion, who own a small, but I think it's around about 12% of the shares of the club. They're concerned about their investment. Other people historically have made a lot of money from selling their shares in West Bromwich Albion, but the smaller shareholders were not the beneficiaries of this.
And unfortunately, Kieran, Coventry City are another club that we've been talking about too much for comfort, haven't we? And there's not good news coming out of there this week either.
Yeah, there's a couple of causes for concern. The first of which I have a lot of sympathy for. So Coventry City are now under an EFL transfer embargo. And it's got to be said that under Trevor Birch, the EFL have really got their act together in terms of monitoring clubs. And this is in respect of the relationship that the club has with HMRC. So we were talking earlier about Mel Morris's regime, which didn't pay HMRC. In respect of Coventry, they had a payment plan. And this is what many organisations, both within the world of sport and entertainment and broader industries, have done. They've come up with some form of an instalment arrangement with HMRC.
That's what I'm doing at the moment, yeah.
Yep. And they've breached it. So that that raises a flag. I think they have to tell the EFL that they've breached it, and the EFL then effectively automatically puts through a transfer embargo. Now, it could be that by the 31st of December, they're back on track. Part of the reason why they've been unable to pay HMRC was at the start of the season, they were unable to play at the Ricoh / CBS Arena. And this was due to rugby matches taking place, which just caused the pitch to be so substandard and dangerous that there was no opportunity to play matches and therefore generate the cash flow, which would have allowed. So I have a lot of sympathy for the state of the position. The second issue in respect of Coventry City is, where are they going to be playing football? Because, as people are probably aware, Wasps Rugby Club, which makes some football clubs look like paragons of virtue in terms of the professionalism in the boardroom, in terms of the way they run their finances.
So much so, Kieran, I've been panicking all week that producer guy suggests we do a Price of Rugby podcast just on that basis alone, which is you haven't got time, Kieran, and I haven't got the interest. But carry on.
Yes. Well, they effectively owned the CBS Arena, as it's now known, but they've gone into administration. It looks like ACL, which is the company which formally owns the stadium, it has put out a notice that it is intending to appoint administrators. It's not published any accounts since 2020. It's the same stories again and again and again, and it is just it becomes tedious. That why aren't people picking up on this? And it takes you 5 minutes. It takes you 30 seconds to whiz on to Company's House. Which I've got it bookmarked.
Plus, you've got your own special tour guide, Kieran, and your own entrance. Yes. You're like Philip and Holly. You don't have to queue up for the Company's House. You go straight to the front of the velvet rope.
Well, I know this sounds bizarre. I've actually been contacted by Company's House to say, would I do a show with them to talk about how great Company's House is. So, that's how bizarre it is.
Please, can I have a ticket for that? Please, can I have a ticket for that? Can I help you? Can I help you write it? Let's do it. Let's make it a musical. Company's House. Oh dear, I was half hoping that story was going to end with you and Philip and Holly doing a show together, but you and Company's House doing a show together. No.
So we don't know what's happening now. Coventry were able to play on Tuesday night at the arena. Where they're going to be playing going forwards, all we know that there is uncertainty involved. There are stories that Mike Ashley, who may or may not have been implicitly referenced to earlier in the show, he might be buying the arena but not the football club. And in the interim period, Coventry could end up playing. It's been said that they could end up playing at Walsall. Yeah, they've had to go and play at Northampton. They've had to play at Birmingham City. It's not fun being a nomad. In these circumstances. Yeah.
I suspect the answer to this is no, Kieran. But do we know how much Coventry City owe to HMRC?
No. That is private. I don't think it'll be a huge amount. They certainly weren't one of the worst when I looked at their most recent accounts. But what's happened since 2021 is uncertain. But they've breached the terms, and EFL I think are being as strict as they can be, because this is what the clubs have voted for. There are a lot of executives of clubs and owners of other clubs who have said, we are doing everything in our power to keep up to date with the instalments, even to the extent of taking out loans from the EFL itself. And therefore we expect this to be kept, because if you don't do that, it can allow clubs to therefore say, well, if we go and pay less to HMRC, and this is one of the things which happened at Derby, we can go and then spend more on wages, which increases our chances of getting promoted. And once we're in the Premier League, everything is solved. And clearly you can't have 24 clubs doing that.
Up in Lancashire, Kieran, fans of English football's, or one of English football's legendary clubs in history, are getting a bit edgy as well, aren't they?
Yes. So I think there are 11 different fan groups associated with Preston North End, and they've sort of put out a joint open letter saying we're not happy. We're not happy with progress on the pitch. We don't know what's happening off the pitch. We're not competing. So they've done that, and I absolutely understand where they're coming from, and I have had some private correspondence with one of the fans in relation to this. What I would say is, and this doesn't sound, I don't want to sound harsh or patronising. Welcome to our world, because we are now in the Premier League, but you and I both know at the start of the season our objective is to get to 17th.
Yeah.
And if we do better, then great. But we're not going to qualify for Europe. We're not going to win a trophy. And it's going to be individual matches that will give us great memories during this season. I mean, Preston, I think they started off with a spectacular number of 0-0 draws, which I think got quite a few fans fairly bored. But if we take a look at Preston's finances, what I've done here is I've gone to the pre-COVID era, because the figures for COVID are distorted. In the pre-COVID year, Preston North End had the second lowest revenue in the EFL Championship. So anything which avoids relegation under those circumstances is an achievement. They had the sixth lowest wage bill. They were paying £143 in wages for every £100 which was coming through the door. And they were effectively relying on Trevor Hemmings, who is their former owner, who sadly passed away a year or so ago. He was putting in, on average, £6 to £7 million a year. So what I would say to fans, and I've been onto the Preston website tonight just to see what is the latest, and the club has said, we acknowledge receipt of your letter. We are happy to have a discussion with you. Can you wait until the World Cup starts, because we want to focus on the upcoming matches? So they're not being ignored, and this has come from one of the Hemmings family, as well as Peter Ridsdale. What is realistic? I mean, I think this is the challenge. There's an awful lot of money sloshing around in the Championship. I know some people believe that parachute payments are the cause and the only cause of some of the distortions. I think they are a contributory factor, but there are other factors at play as well. The average Preston wage, based on my calculations, is, and inverted commas here, is only £9,000 a week in a division where the overall average is closer to 15. So, football, we've said this before, football is a talent industry. Talent follows the money. If you've got the second, or if you've got a bottom six wage bill, that to a certain extent determines your league position. And as a fan, I don't want to hear it. If I was a Preston fan, I wouldn't want to hear that either.
So you say that we're not going to qualify for Europe, Kieran, but after the game on Saturday, on the basis of 1-0 win against Southampton, not only were many Palace fans in the pub having us in the Europa Conference, they were also working out the circumstances in which we would play Brighton in the final, which they've already decided would be in Paris. Which would just imagine the look on the faces of the Paris police saying, that stick you got into last year? Well, we're lumbering you with Palace Brighton in the Europa Conference final. This does illustrate something, Kieran, that we spoke about just in the last pod, though. There are probably fans of 60 clubs that are anxious about one change of owner can change the financial picture completely. In this case, it's the tragic death of Trevor Hemmings, but there's so many clubs that are only one change of owner away from their circumstances changing for the worse, aren't there?
Yes, and that's because football is not a sustainable industry. in its present form. And I think if some of the owners of the bigger clubs in the Premier League get their way, that sustainability would be further reduced. And that's perhaps why we need an independent regulator of football.
Hey, hello. We mentioned Mike Ashley. I think Mike Ashley, in the great scheme of things, must be the most mentioned person on this pod. He's got a bit defensive this week, to the point of chippy, I would say, Kieran, isn't he?
Yes. So in respect of this, when Amanda Staveley's group was in negotiation
Sorry, can I just clarify, Kieran? That wasn't an ironic Simpsons type.
No. I have got a frog in my throat.
Because just the way you cough there indicated that's like a phlegmy version of inverted commas.
So when there were negotiations taking place, and Amanda Staveley has a minority stake in it, around about 10%. PIF have got 80%. Reuben Brothers have got 10%. In terms of the acquisition of Newcastle United, in order to pay our silver-tongued friends, Mike Ashley lent Amanda Staveley £10 million.
Right.
And under the terms of this loan was that should the bid be successful, Amanda Staveley should not say anything which would A, admonish, and I think you'd quite like if she admonished you, or B, diminish the reputation of Mr. Ashley. And
sorry, Kieran, just to clarify for those listeners who don't know, this is money he lent to Amanda Staveley as part of her attempt to take over the club from him.
That's right. But, because she was incurring professional fees during the course of the bid, and she didn't have. She may have assets which are not cash. So he says, right, I'll give you the cash, because he was keen to get the deal through.
Yeah.
So he said, I'll give you a leg up here. I will give you £10 million as a loan, which is repayable in October 2023. But in the small print of the loan, he said, well, I've come in for a load of stick from Newcastle fans and pundits and various people. But if you say anything which admonishes me or diminishes my reputation subsequent to a successful takeover, then the loan effectively becomes repayable immediately.
Ah, okay.
Now, he is now claiming, and this is where he's clearly being chippy, that if you take a look at statements to journalists that's been made, and also an article in the Sunday Times, that indeed Man Staveley had been diminishing his reputation or admonishing him. And therefore, he was entitled to his money back immediately. So this is why I've not borrowed money from Mike Ashley, because if you go on the Price of Football website and read the review of Newcastle United's finances, if you take the first letter of every sentence, it, by a pure coincidence, spells Mike Ashley is a fat Cockney wanker. And people would say that's not, and I'm saying, well, it's just amazing coincidences occur. But I don't owe him any money, and I don't shop at Sports Direct. It's not even one of those big bags or mugs. So that's where we are. So he's clearly not happy. For a bloke who you would think that would be fairly thick-skinned, he does seem to have I think he's got a sensitive side to him that people don't quite understand.
I believe if you read the Da Vinci Code, which I don't intend to do again, if you look at the opening letters of the first chapter of that, it says Mike Ashley is a fat cock. Is that a standard clause in a loan contract, Kieran, that I'm going to lend you the money, but you have to say nice things about me, or not say anything bad about me?
I think this is quite specific. I think he wanted to be seen as not as a bad actor as far as this is concerned, and joking aside, and I quite happily take the mickey, and I have fun when I'm writing things. For all of the criticism that can be levelled at Mike Ashley, he did leave a club in a very strong financial position. which enabled the new owners to come in and spend £200 million in the first 12 months on players, and they are now in a Champions League slot. And having seen them play, they're on merit as well.
Oh, absolutely right, they are. Yeah, it turns out our 0-0 draw up there was a really good result in hindsight. I imagine Amanda would probably know somebody who could help her lay her hands on £10 million now somewhere, wouldn't she? She'd be right. She's not going to have to crowdfund that, is she? She needs to pay it back.
Well, I think if she did crowdfund it in Newcastle, she'd probably get it. Such is the high esteem in which the new owners are held.
Yeah. We spoke a couple of weeks ago, Kieran, about a rather strange deal for, and I'm still going to call them Sorari. I know their name is so rare, but they entered into a deal with 5, I think it was, championship clubs, and now it seems they could be stepping up a league.
Yes, so this is a story which has again come through the newspapers. So rare. There was supposed to be discussed at the most recent Premier League meeting, which took place last Friday, so I believe, for a £30 million a season deal to run their competition. Now, it's sort of digital fantasy football where you can have 3, 5 or 11 players in your team. You can set up leagues and you can play against other people. So for anybody that does fantasy football, I still do fantasy football with the guys who we set up a league in 1992 and we've still got we're still going strong. So the fantasy football is good fun. This is an NFT based or token based scheme. And I think the reason why some people are a bit concerned is that if you want to, you can just pick up tokens for nothing. That's fine. But the players don't tend to be very good.
Yeah.
So, if you want good players, you're going to have to pay for them. And if you're going to do that, you're going to have to use something called Ethereum, which is a cryptocurrency. It is one of the bigger cryptocurrencies around. And it's going to cost you money. Now, the player tokens that you get, because they are all on the blockchain, they are all unique. And some of them are, they call it so rare, some of them are very rare. So you might have a platinum Kylian Mbappe card, which in theory you could pick up randomly. And then in theory, you could sell that for a lot of money. You could also, pick up a less gifted player who's not going to pick you up many fantasy football points at the weekend. So the Premier League appears to be willing to sell its intellectual property. I think when we spoke about the EFL Championship clubs, my understanding, they were looking for deals somewhere in the region of 70 to 100k per club. Looking at this in the Premier League, 30 million between 20 clubs. That's £1.5 million per club, but that's the pulling power of the Premier League. So, always buyer beware. Don't get sucked into spending a lot of money on it. Would be my non-qualified advice. It is it's a strange market. The value of Ethereum, as well as the value of your cards, can go down as well as down.
I congratulate you, Kieran, because I was fairly certain that when you started talking about less gifted players, your next words were going to be Mark Cucurella. But you've left it in the past, Kieran. Well done. Another story we talked about last week. You talked about people in the current financial climate having to make decisions about what counts as luxury items, shall we say. And Sky have shown that this week with some of the figures they've revealed.
Yes, so this is Sky's new owners. So they put out information in the second quarter. They lost, I think, around 250,000 subscribers. In the third quarter, it looks like around about 500,000. Now That is across the whole of Europe,
right?
So there is Sky. Is it Sky DE? Sky does have a relationship with other countries as well. But
Italy,
also, we know that Sky is has been very successful here in England. A lot to do with the success of its sporting products. There's no doubt that the quantity of matches and the quality of the quality of what you're seeing on your screen is very good. But people are having to make complex decisions. There was a report out, I think it said 40% of households have less than £3 of discretionary income, which is very, very concerning. And that's down from, I think it was £70 a year ago. So people are having to spend more money on food, more money on fuel, more money on travel, and that means that there's less money. So you can see why it's happening. Is there a natural flaw for this? We'll have to wait to see what happens on a more broad issue in terms of the economy. And also if you are a subscriber to Sky or Now TV, your subscription prices tend to go up a lot faster than inflation historically. They have always said, well, we've always had to go and pay more than inflation to get the renewed TV rights, and we pass that on to our customers, and you're seeing more matches, and you've got more sports and so on. But it's getting tougher, and the overall subscriber market with Sky, Amazon, Disney Plus, Paramount, God knows who else, is becoming a very crowded market, and I think people are now looking at just how much money they're spending on this, and they are making choices.
Oddly, Kieran, and I don't mean this to sound in the least way facetious, because it's not, but this is another conversation that took place in the Portsmouth Arms on Saturday, because the guy who runs it, Graham, along with many publicans and bar owners, are worried about the hospitality industry and energy bills. But someone else said that this could be good news, because what you might find is that people are going, all right, I'm not going to subscribe to Sky, but I'll go to the pub because they've got it. And also, if enough of us go to the pub to watch it, the pub will be able to stay open and keep the heating on. So it's shameful that we're even in a jokey way discussing these things, but it might have that kind of effect. But I can't see any way out for Sky other than that. I think they're going to have to look at reducing subscriptions, because I mean that's a huge amount of people to lose. But again, I know producer Guy doesn't like us talking about politics, but fifth largest economy in the world and all that. And the Northern Irish Football League, Kieran, has come up with a collective approach that I think many politicians in this country would do well to look at.
Yes. So what they've said, and I'm also seeing this on an individual household level as well. Okay. If you're a single football club, you don't really have a lot of negotiation power.
Yeah.
If you come together as a collective, then you can go to a supplier. Now, this is in the case of energy, and say, we potentially can offer you, 10, 12, 18, 20 football clubs, all of whom would be willing to buy your heating and lighting, your gas and electricity products. Let's strike a deal. And I think, again, I'm not trying to plug anybody here, but Martin Lewis, who you see him on the television on a regular basis, because he's one of the few people that are standing up for the consumer. Yeah. I think he's got some sort of collective buying club, and I'm not going to plug his website, but I think people know where to look if they want to go there. And we are seeing people coming together because you can't afford to buy things on an individual basis. And this is the case for football clubs. I was on the radio earlier today with somebody from a non-league club, and they were saying the biggest challenge they now have, it's not even floodlights. It's that if they want to if they go into an away fixture a fair distance away, the cost of hiring a coach, because of the increase in the fuel prices, has gone from £400 to £800 to £900 for an away fixture.
Really?
And you do that for 23 times, and you work out that in non-league is a significant amount of your budget, on top of the fact that you're paying more for your floodlights and so on. So all clubs at grassroots level are being hit significantly. there's no reason why football should be singled out and given additional benefits, but it does provide, we've said on so many occasions, football does provide so much good rather than the 90 minutes of people running around on the field itself.
Yeah, so much good, so much comfort, so much company for some people who don't have company otherwise. In a rather pleasing circularity, Kieran, our second story, we spoke about taxpayers losing money. And our second last story, we also talk about taxpayers losing money, but possibly considerably more than they're losing to Derby.
Yes. So this is in respect of the sale of Rangers. It ultimately stems from the 2011 sale to a gentleman called Craig White. This club was sold for £1, but it also involved the acquisition of all of the liabilities of Rangers. Now, I'm not going to go into the depths of the story because I've not got 3 hours to set aside. And B, even with my best tin hat on, I will be accused of being either biased to Rangers or biased against Rangers by people. But this is in relation to a gentleman called Mr. Imran Ahmad, who was involved with running a part of Rangers. And I think the Crown Prosecution Service, or the equivalent of, has already paid out around about £50 million for malicious prosecutions. And it would appear that Mr. Ahmad is going to try to hold my beer in respect to that, and is putting in a claim for £75 million for the equivalent of malicious prosecution. He's claiming that the accusations which have been made about him, has given him a reputational damage, which means he's been unable to take work. There's been loss of livelihood, and this whole Rangers tale. And there are some excellent books out about it, by the way. If people are interested, I know that it's a emotionally sensitive subject. Is proving to be very expensive because something went wrong. So, first of all, things went wrong with regards to the takeover, and then the consequential issues in terms of the administration. I know that people from the administration world, I think they ended up getting a settlement as well. It's all become very expensive, and I would say that a thorough investigation should be undertaken by somebody independent, but trying to find somebody independent is difficult. And there's also a case for saying so much money has already been spent on this already.
Yeah,
you've got to try and put a line in the sand at some point.
The World Cup is almost upon us, Kieran, and as one of the more pessimistic Palace fans, I'm pleased to say that Operation Stay Out of the bottom three before the World Cup starts seems to be going okay. And I suspect that we'll be as busy as ever during the World Cup, and there will be World Cup-based stories. And we have the first of them, and rather bizarrely, it involves the Ukrainian FA.
Yes. The Ukrainian FA have been in contact with FIFA to say that Iran has been supplying Russia with drones, which are now being used to destroy heating and lighting and the facilities of people that are living in Kiev and other major cities in Ukraine. And therefore, given that Russia is banned from the World Cup, if Iran is supplying these drones, surely there is a case for banning Iran as well. And if that is the case, Ukraine is willing to step up and fill that particular void. So it's not a finance story as such, but I think it is indicative of this World Cup is going to be different for 1,001 reasons, including the fact that not many fans appear to be going because they can't afford to get there, and once they are there, they can't afford to stay there.
Yeah, well, the last thing FIFA need is Ukraine kicking off, because they got enough trouble after their announcement today that the World Cup was officially going to be carbon neutral, to howls of laughter from environmental groups across the country, including one British politician who worked out on the back of a fag packet that there were about 10 million tonnes of carbon dioxide out in their calculations. So it's a strange one. I will end up watching every game, but I've actually had the discussion with myself about whether I should do or not. Which, you look forward to a World Cup so often, and there is part of me thinking, I'm going to feel slightly dirty, slightly grubby watching this World Cup, knowing the circumstances by which the tournament was gained, knowing the systemic corruption that was involved in it, knowing what's happened to construction workers. It's just there's going to be no joy in it. I have to say, Kieran, but I don't think I'll be able to resist the temptation to do it. Four games a day. It's just you just have to swallow your pride and hope that the football at least is decent.
Well, I think I'm going to go the full hipster on this, and I don't think I can be asked. I'm going to watch some non-league. I'm going to watch some lower league.
Yeah.
And I'm going to spend time with my grandchildren because now I'll counter that. Yeah, if England get to the quarterfinals or Wales get to the quarterfinals, then I'll be watching and cheering on the teams. But I find it difficult to get motivated. And I've even got a confession. My Panini sticker album is about 90% empty, and that's never been the case before.
Oh, dear. Well, that's a first world problem, isn't it, Kieran?
That is a first world problem.
Really is a first world problem. I'm sure the Baroness feels your pain. Really. How old's your grandchild?
My eldest is 3, and my youngest Elsie has just turned 1.
Yeah, so I think even Elsie will be saying, "Grandad, you're too old for Panini stickers. Come now." Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to join them and make a small monthly contribution, that'd be very kind of you. You can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. As you know, our next live show will take place at Plymouth Argyle's home park on Tuesday the 13th of December. We are very much looking forward to that. Tickets are still available, still 1 or 2 available from Plymouth Argyle's website. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. And as ever, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thanks as always, folks, for the support. Thank you for whoever has set up Price of Football Context on Twitter. Bringing help
out of context Price of Football, just quotes taken out of, and they've got followers. It's fantastic. I was really chuffed to see that.
That's absolutely brilliant. And I love the fact that the only person that they follow on Twitter is Swiss Ramble.
Yeah, it's a small world, football finance, isn't it?
It is, yes. So by all means, keep in contact with us. We do appreciate it. We do respond to messages. Yeah, we do try to do some of the things which clubs don't always do, and try to engage and be as transparent as we can.
Yeah, I have to say, Kieran, we try and do some of the things you suggest on Twitter, but some of them are physically not possible.
So Patreon is one way of supporting the show, but another way of supporting the show is to go onto your Twitter app and to give us a review. If you give us 5 stars, it helps us in the charts. I think we're still quite regularly in the top 30 of sports podcasts, which we're dead chuffed about. We will be gracious losers at the Football Supporters Association Awards in less than a fortnight, as Barry Glendenning goes up yet again to collect for the Guardian, and fantastic show that it is as well.
You may be a gracious loser, Kieran. I shall be kicking tables over.
It's very much apparently the stars that matter when it comes to Apple and its algorithms. So it doesn't matter what you say, and I think this is a record number of topics we've covered in a single show tonight. So I'd just like to say that as it's been a packed show tonight, if you'd rather say the show was presented by Ronnie Corbett and Ronnie Barker, I'd fully understand.
Oh, wouldn't that be lovely? Wouldn't that be lovely? I wrote for Ronnie Corbett once.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, he was just the loveliest, kindest person you can meet. Ronnie Barker, meh. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The price of football.